To our webinar Wednesday today. April happens to be the month of the military child, and today we've decided we want to share some research with you on working with military families and think about the role that out-of-school time programs can have in supporting these families. You'll learn about the challenges that military families face and strategies that you can use in your program to support them. And we have a special guest joining us today. Carly Black is the 4-H Military Liaison for Nebraska. Can you introduce yourself, Carly, and just make sure everyone can hear your voice?
Yeah, thank you, Sandra. Can everyone hear me? So my name is Carly Black, and I work for Nebraska Extension. I have kind of a dual role here that I serve as the 4-H Military Liaison, as well as working in the local county office providing STEM programming.
Really appreciate you joining us today, Carly, and look forward to hearing your insight a little bit later as we talk about what we can do to support military families. We'll start today with a quick poll, and it's pretty simple, but what I want to hear is whether you are currently working with military families or not, or maybe you're not even sure whether there are military families in the programs that you work with. So go ahead and share your vote, and I'm going to pause for just a minute so everyone can take a minute to vote. But right now it's looking like people have joined us because they are working with military families, and that's really good to know. We know that there are also a lot of programs out there that are working directly with military families but don't realize that they're part of the audience that they're serving. But it looks like on our webinar today, we know that we're working with military families, and that's really great to see. So thank you for taking a minute to let us know a little bit about where you're coming from in this webinar, and I appreciate your feedback. All right, so what I want to talk about first is what it takes to work well with military families and who these families are. Today, there are nearly 2 million children who are growing up in military families across the country. And of course, we know that many of these children live on military installations, but they also live in rural and urban communities. About 70% of military families do not live on base, so they are distributed all throughout our community. More and more community-based organizations are providing direct service to military families because they are so spread out across the country. And community-based organizations like Afterschool Programs are especially important in providing a supportive environment for military children. Some things you can use to welcome military families, and especially during Month of the Military Child, set up posters or have children create their own posters about supporting military families. Use yellow ribbons and other visual reminders to convey to families your understanding, respect, and welcome for them in your program. I see in the chat box Carly has asked for a clarification, and this would be really helpful for her. As you're working with military families, are you working with families on base, off base? Do you have active, guard, or reserve families that you're working with? If you could share that in the chat box, that would help us understand a little bit more where you're coming from. Resilience is the ability to overcome challenges with flexibility, inner strength, and a positive outlook. Military families are resilient. But it's important to recognize that resilience is a product of relationships between children, families, and the resources around them. So as out-of-school time programs, we can be part of the environment that creates resilience in children. Resilience is not static. It can change across time and situations, and it can be developed and built. Later in the webinar, we're going to talk about strategies for building resilience. But this is our goal for all those children we're working with, is to build resilience with them, and especially for military families, because there are unique challenges that military families face. And we want to recognize what those challenges are and how we can help support them by creating this environment for support and resilience. Family separations are difficult and complicated for military families. Many military children have said goodbye to a parent for more than once for deployments or lengthy training. So it can be a process that they go through repeatedly and at different points in their development to deal with separation. Children of Guard and Reserve parents often do not see themselves as military children as they're engaged in the community growing up. But at the point where a parent deploys or away on training, this becomes clear to them, but their delay in self-identification can make the transition to the new norm of separation with their parent more difficult. So it can be especially challenging for those children who are not living on installations and don't necessarily see themselves as military children until that separation occurs. During the parent separation, active duty, Guard, and Reserve military youth experience significant changes. If the service member is a single parent, the child may be living with a new caregiver, such as an aunt or grandparent. They also take on new responsibilities around the house as children are asked to take on additional chores or roles in the family. At the very least, the military service member will be missing important events and celebrations that they would normally attend. Stress can provide opportunities for children to develop coping strategies, and after-school programs can have a positive impact on how children deal with stress by providing supportive, reliable environments, positive relationships with adults that help children create secure attachments. Resilience emerges as children face adversity, process the skills that help them take advantage of their assets, and cope with stress in a positive way. One of the things that is relevant to all youth in our program is the idea of a trauma-informed approach to working with young people. Because though we know military children experience additional stresses and traumas, all the children in our program may be susceptible to trauma. A trauma-informed approach is based on 4 key assumptions. In a trauma-informed program, staff realize the widespread impact of trauma and understand that there are different paths to recovery. Staff are trained to recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma in youth, and programs respond by integrating research on trauma into their policies, procedures, and practices. And programs seek to defend against re-traumatization of youth in their programs and staff. So that's kind of the research basis of what it means to take a trauma-informed approach to working with young people. But what that actually can mean in practice are some pretty specific things that you can do. You can maximize the physical and psychological safety of youth in your program. Your policies, procedures, and practices should all support safety. You can review resources from Click to Science and facilitating inclusive learning experiences to see how you can set up your spaces for psychological as well as physical safety. You can also be aware of the individual needs of youth in your program, including their trauma-related needs. And that may be as simple as talking directly with youth about what's happening in their life, or working with staff in the school who can help you understand the needs of individuals within your program. You can also provide activities in an environment that enhance well-being and resilience. Knowing that children are naturally resilient, you can help them develop their skills and resources. Review resources from Click to Science on reflecting and processing experiences for strategies that can help build resilience. And we'll be sharing one of those resources a little bit later in the webinar. You can also engage with families as a source for resilience, communicating with families and understanding what it is that families need and can offer to support the youth in your program. You also need to support the well-being and resilience of your staff. Recognize that your staff may have experienced trauma or may develop secondary traumatic reactions in dealing with youth who've experienced trauma. Provide training and resources to help staff manage stress and develop their resilience. This is increasingly important when there's a community-wide traumatic event such as a natural disaster that can spark trauma in both staff and youth in your program. And work with community partners. Find the resources in your community that can help your program and your staff and the youth develop resilience. These are all specific things that you can do in your program. And I want to share with you an example of how you can use resources from Click to Science to help support this idea of building resilience. The resource I want to share with you focuses on reflecting and processing STEM experiences, and it's really designed as a video to highlight how staff can help youth make connections to their prior experiences and reflect on an engineering design challenge. It's a resource that you can use with your staff to help them develop this skill in reflecting and processing. What we want you to do as we work through this activity today is think specifically about developing resilience and pro-social behaviors in youth. And think about how we can use a STEM activity like this to help youth develop their coping skills and learn the self-control and behavior management that will help them be successful in life through a well-planned STEM experience. So the resource we're going to be using is called Making Meaning Through Reflection, and it's one of the resources you can download in the lower right-hand corner of the screen here. And we're also going to be looking at the video Making Meaning from STEM Learning. And I will share that video with everybody, but I realize that we've had some issues with our internet connection before, so hopefully you won't have any problem viewing that video, but if you do, you can click on the link in the Web Links pod to see it directly. The whole resource, Making Meaning Through Reflection, takes about 25 minutes to facilitate with staff. But today we're just going to focus on the video and think about what's happening in this video through the lens of a trauma-informed approach that we just talked about, and think about what strategies staff are using in this video that could also be part of this trauma-informed approach of building pro-social behaviors and resilience in children. So as we watch the video, look for those strategies that you think are going to help children develop positive relationships, develop resilience, develop problem-solving skills. Let me pull up the video now.
Air just going past, it pushes things like clouds and rain.
To make STEM experiences meaningful, youth need to make the STEM learning personal. In this video, frontline staff at a Tinker Makerspace use meaning-making strategies to empower youth to reflect on what they already know when processing new STEM learning. Staff use provocations and plussing to challenge youth to think of new ideas based on what they already know.
I'm wondering what you guys know about gravity. What do you guys know about gravity?
Gravity is holding me on the ground right now.
Gravity is holding us on the ground.
Pushes something down to keep it down.
So what do you guys know about lift? Or have you ever even heard that word before?
I've heard it, but don't know exactly.
Okay. Mariah?
It lifts you up. Like
Lift.
in outer space, there's a lot of lift.
What things do you guys know that slowly float to the ground? Yes.
Just paper.
Paper. Samantha?
A balloon.
A balloon. Yes.
A parachute.
A parachute. So what we're going to be doing is creating a contraption that can first float up and out of the wind tunnel. So what is adding an egg and another army guy going to do to your contraption?
Cooling down.
Cooling down. What made you want to change it, and what did you notice about yours?
I noticed that when you open it, it stays open, and when you close it, it stays closed.
Okay.
That's what it the pipe cleaner does, and then the other army guy just adds weight.
That adds more weight to it. So you've created more drag. And what did you say catches the air again?
This thing is like a parachute.
Yeah, just like a parachute, basically.
I added this to make it have more gravity, sort of.
Uh-huh. So why did that not work?
Because it didn't even fly.
When I did do this, and I had the army man on top inside with the parachute on top, and that still didn't work because it was too heavy still with other things, so it'll just go down.
Does anybody have a plus for Tania? What could she have done to this design to get it to hover more? Samantha.
Maybe make it farther from the actual cup.
Make it farther from the cup. And what do you think that would have done? Made it float more.
Now, please take a minute to share your observations in the chat box. What were some specific strategies that you noticed that you think would help develop resilience? I know this wasn't what the video was edited for, but I think you might have seen some things that would be useful to point out. I need to read the whole chat box too, but I do want to point out some trends that I saw in the comments there. A lot of emphasis on how the staff use questions to really open up thinking, to be supportive of new ideas that the youth had to offer and to welcome their new ideas. Reflection and processing is a lot about using questions to help students think about what it is that they've learned. They've had an experience, and the time of discussion, of sharing ideas and questioning helps them process that experience and turn what they experienced into learning by connecting it to their prior knowledge and thinking about what was really important about that experience. This sort of discussion time also helps youth develop pro-social behavior as they're listening to each other and communicating. This is a really small group here of 6 young people, so there's lots of opportunities for them to listen and support one another. So this is an example of how a STEM activity that is really about learning about gravity and lift and doing this design process to solve a problem also is developing skills that can be relevant to other areas of life. Part of the important practice you need to include as you're reflecting and processing is to make that explicit. Don't just assume that children can apply the problem-solving strategies you're using in the wind tunnel to other types of problems, but ask them when they share a strategy how that could apply to other areas too. Help them see that they're developing skills that they can use in other areas, and also encourage discussion of the pro-social behaviors of supporting and listening to one another. Point out those strategies and help you see that you value them and that you think they're important for them to have. This is a diagram from the Making Meaning Through Reflection professional development experience that outlines the reflective process that they're using in this activity. And as you teach youth to think through this process, also, as I said before, really help them see that it doesn't just apply to the STEM activities they're doing in after school, but they can use this same process when they're facing a problem in their personal life or at home. What happened? What was the stressful event that they're frustrated with or worried about? Why do you think that happened? How was that different from what you thought would happen? This can be really important as use of processing through the deployment process. What questions, what problems do you still have, and what could you do next? Really helping them think about actions and what they have control of and what they can change. As you help youth integrate this process and how they're thinking about STEM activities, and help them see how it also applies to problem solving in other areas of life, you're explicitly helping them develop the skills to be resilient and solve the problems and challenges that they face. So we want to be very intentional about developing positive relationships with youth, creating that supportive environment, and also using the reflective process and helping them apply that reflective process not just to the STEM activities that they're doing, but to see how it applies in other areas as well. So here are 4 things that you can do to make a difference in your program and make it more supportive for all the young people, especially those from military families. First, reframe how your program views disruptive behavior. Help staff see behavior as a response to stress or trauma rather than as misbehavior. So reframing disruptive behavior and thinking about what the underlying cause is, what it's a response to, can help you deal with that behavior in a way that's going to be productive, whereas just viewing it as misbehavior can lose the opportunity to really solve the problem that's causing the disruptive behavior. The second thing you can do is be proactive in supporting youth with disruptive behavior. Plan ahead. Know when stressful situations are coming up. Provide opportunities and strategies for youth to exit out when they become stressed so that you can be proactive rather than reactive to disruptions. The third strategy is to seek out resources for training your staff in regards to trauma and their own self-care. There are some resources from Click to Science that you might find helpful, but we really encourage you to reach out in your community and find other resources specifically about dealing with trauma or helping staff care for themselves as they're dealing with the stresses in their work environment. Seek out partners in your community who can help families access the resources for dealing with trauma and can help you train staff so that you have community partners that can really help your program meet the needs of all the young people that you are serving, in particular these areas around dealing with trauma and stress. So I wanted to save the second half of our program as a chance to talk with Carly a little bit about her experiences and what it is she has done in working with military families and how she can help us develop strategies that are going to be helpful for us. So Carly, thank you. I see you. So start out by telling us about yourself, Carly.
All right. So again, my name is Carly Black, and I am the 4-H Military Liaison for Nebraska Extension. So what really drew me to my current role is my husband was in the Army for about 6 years, just under 6 years. We were only stationed in one location, which is really surprising, but we were just in Fort Drum, New York. So this is actually one of the most deployed units, the 10th Mountain, in all of the Army. And so we were up there for 6 years, and my husband just couldn't get away, or we didn't want to get away. Either way you want to look at it. So I always joke that for the first 6 years of our marriage that we were apart more than we were together. So when we were there, I mean, my husband only deployed one time to Iraq, but the rest of the time he was gone on trainings, and some of these trainings would be 14 days to 90-day trainings, you know, multiple times a year. So it was just that constant separation of he was here and then he was gone, and there'd be some sort of change that would happen. And so it really is eye-opening when you start talking about actual families and how that impacts the whole family dynamics of just this uncertainty of the military lifestyle. So while we were in New York, I had the privilege to work with a swim team. So I actually was a head coach for a swim team that served mostly military youth, and we did practice on the installation. So we had about 75 youth, and I had 4 assistant coaches under me. This was kind of a year-round team. And then also while I was there, I had worked at a before and after school school-age center within the community, so off base. And I had about 50% of the 60 youth enrolled in that program were military youth. After that, I had interned in a couple different management positions within the child and youth on Fort Drum, and then I accepted a position with the Army Reserve for their child and youth headquarters position in Salt Lake City, Utah. So I worked in Salt Lake City serving military families, where I would attend briefings or trainings and work directly with the families or soldiers and provide resources and referrals to kind of help them adapt to whatever situation they were happened to be in. What I found unique was moving from the active duty to the Guard and Reserve components, were the deployment cycles were actually almost heavier for them, because the military relies significantly on the Guard and Reserve to help all of the different fronts that they are working on deploying soldiers to. Another unique thing working with the Army Reserve that I was able to do is I helped facilitate a few different regional youth leadership summits. So we were able to bring in, we had about 5 of them that I helped with, 50 youth from certain regions, and we had large groups of just meetings with the kids. And so it was more of like a professional development conference with these youth, and the youth were able to gain skills, but most importantly, they were able to connect with other military youth. Because what is unique about Guard and Reserve families, as Sandra mentioned earlier, is a lot of times they don't identify as military youth until their soldier, airman, Marine is about to deploy. And then when they are going to deploy, or they have deployed, they are suddenly a military youth who are trying to understand these new roles in their lives. So we were able to create those connections with these high school aged Guard and Reserve youth. Following my short tenure with the Army Reserve, I accepted a position here in Nebraska with as a 4-H educator, and then I quickly was asked to serve as a 4-H military liaison for the state of Nebraska. So my position as a 4-H liaison is kind of twofold. That we have the Department of Defense has a grant that states can apply for to receive some money to help fund some programs across the state. So our program here in Nebraska, like a lot of states, have a active duty component where we work very closely with the Air Force base that's here in Nebraska, and we have a 4-H club that meets there, and we have staff that help kind of facilitate those club meetings. And then we also provide professional development to the staff at the centers for the active duty Air Force installation. And then we have some summer camps that we are able to send these youth to. In addition, we have kind of what's near and dear to my heart is the geographically dispersed youth. So these are the Guard and Reserve or just active duty military dependents that don't live on the installation. Maybe their family is separated for some reason, and so they're living within the community. And so really in Nebraska, we really have focused on connecting those youth with the local programs in their area and just trying to give them the opportunity to have some sort of skill building, meaningful connections within their community. So I'd say the biggest thing that I've learned while serving military families over the last 10 years is the importance of resiliency. And again, I think Sandra really hit it very well. when she talked a lot about the resiliency and the need for it. And that is like the big buzzword topic. So anybody that is working with military families, if you are able to say that you are helping to improve the resiliency or coping skills of their youth, you are meeting the mission mandates of each of the military branches, that there are a ton of resiliency trainings that are available for all components as well as family members. And so just knowing that you want to be intentional in teaching these skills and allowing youth to create resiliency.
Thank you, Carly. I really would love to have you think a little bit about, especially with geographically dispersed youth, what is the role that after-school programs can have to support these youth? I know as your role as an extension educator, you work a lot with after-school programs. How do you see the overlap between what after-school programs provide and what military families could benefit from?
That's a really good question. So, I mean, I think after school is, this unique time to really explore learning and have that messy learning experience. That's what I love about that audience, is you're able to be messy and you're able to explore the interests of those that you're serving and you're working with. So military families, whether they are active, guard, or reserve, I mean, they're looking for what any family wants, is just that quality program, but they might require a little bit extra patience on flexibility of their programming, or having those personal conversations and really getting to know them. And then maybe as you build these relationships with them, inviting them, maybe the family to participate or the youth, to share something that is unique about their life, their situation. And so being able to honor their roles in the military family and showcase some of their learning, I think would be a unique opportunity for the after-school program to really work and partner with that military family and see them as a resource. Because one thing that is really amazing about working with military families are, if you say, hey, we want to learn more about some sort of aviation, and they're attached to an aviation unit, or you want to learn something more about like medical, and they work, and maybe they're a vet unit, or they're like a medical or a transporter or something, where if you find out what unit they're attached to or what their job is, I mean, they love to do community outreach. I mean, that is one thing that is kind of their bread and butter, that I think they see it as maybe a way of recruiting extra young, even in that early elementary age, and just sharing. But it would be a perfect opportunity for an after-school program to partner with a military component. And so many of them are STEM-focused jobs and careers. I mean, we work a lot with, in Nebraska, I also do the robotics program, and we've had some of the Army Reserve robotics units come out to some of our events, and they're able to showcase their like bomb robots and let the kids drive them and use them. I mean, it is awesome to see that interaction.
That STEM focus makes a lot of sense to me. Another question I have is about how after-school programs can reach out to military families, or can let those families know that they're welcome in the program. One of the challenges I think that a lot of programs face is they may not realize that they have military families in their program. They may not know how to connect with those families that aren't in their program. So what are some strategies that any sort of program can use to reach out to those military families and let them know they're welcome?
Right. So I think one of the biggest struggles when trying to work with military families is trying to identify them. That's the biggest question that nobody can answer. If you talk with anybody that works with even active duty components, that they're only given a certain amount of information, and it's really just for operational security from the Department of Defense, that they don't want to have a list of, oh, you know, these people are military connected, in case it fell into the wrong hands and there was some sort of coercion or harm done to the military dependents for that service member. But I would say every large city, or even most of the rural communities, will have some sort of military component that lives within it. And when you polled this, those that are here, the attendees, that everybody said that, yeah, they have somebody, and some of them said, yeah, they have a little bit of everybody. And so you're on the right track. You know that you have service members in there, or dependents. And the question is, maybe just ask them, you know, if you're not sure, you know that they're part of military connected somehow, go ahead and ask them if they're Army, like if they're Reserve Guard or active duty, because that might get you a better understanding of how mobile they are, or how frequently their service member is around your home. But when you are working with these communities, I think it's important to I don't know, like just finding the resources. And no, can you ask that one again? I got a little distracted, Sandra.
So you answered the first part of it, but what are some things that you can do to help those families feel welcome in your program?
Right. Okay.
So how can you make your program welcoming to military families?
Right. Okay. So military families, I think that it is a line that I don't know if you really need to say, oh, you know, yeah, we welcome, we want you, that sometimes they don't even need or want that special treatment, at least that recognition publicly. But if you do know that they are connected somehow, just having those small intimate conversations, and just, I think the welcoming piece would just be developing those relationships with them individually and kind of knowing where they are, because as I said before, the military is ever changing. And even if you are a reserve unit or a guard unit, I mean, guard units will be activated on demand if there's a national emergency, whether it's in their state or multiple states away, just like how all the hurricanes happened, that we had people here in Nebraska that were activated for 3 or 4 weeks, that they went down there to Texas and to Florida to help. And so it's just, if you are aware of kind of where they are, then you can have a little bit better communication and maybe empathy as you're working with them. And I think that would help them feel more welcomed into your program.
Thank you, Carly. I think you gave us a lot of insight into what it's like to work with military families, and what are some things that we can do. One of my biggest takeaways is it's not that you need to treat these families differently, but communicating with them as you communicate with all your families is going to help you better meet their needs. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn off our video as we finish up the webinar, but don't leave, because we want to give you a chance to kind of give a final takeaway message if you'd like to in just a minute. So wrapping things up today, our bottom line is that it is our goal for all our programs to build a strong foundation in children and youth to help them be prepared to deal with the challenges they're going to face in life. We want to ensure that all youth possess the necessary skills to be successful, to lead a productive life, and especially want to help our military children navigate the unique circumstances that are part of the military lifestyle and being in a military family. We can do this through hands-on experiential projects, experiences, and opportunities to build STEM skills and to build pro-social resiliency at the same time. I do want to invite you to our next webinar, which is May 9th, Learning About Space from NASA and Beyond, and remind you that registration is still open for the Click to Science National Trainer Institute on May 22nd and 23rd in Omaha, Nebraska. Carly, do you have any final thoughts or takeaways you want to share with us before we leave today?
So I had just wanted to just touch on a few of the links that I had posted in the web links that I feel, even after listening to the survey, maybe some of the roles that you might have, you could find some value in it. So I do have the 4-H Military Partnership website. So if you work with, or you would like to maybe partner with Extension within your state and community, and you have military families that you serve, I would encourage you to connect with your local state military liaison, and you can go to the partnership website and locate who they are. That, again, they do have grant money that can help you, maybe not this cycle, but starting in October is when the new cycle year starts. And if you develop this partnership now, they might be able to help write your programming into their grant, and whether that provides funding for curriculum or activities or field trips or like camps that you might like to start forming, or after school clubs if you have something like that, that they would be a great resource for that. Another resource is the Military Child and Education Coalition. So if you do work for a school and you have not heard of MSEC, I would encourage you to look into them a little bit more, that they have a vast amount of resources, and they have a ton of training that is available, where they have trainers that will come out to your location, and they have some Guard and Reserve training. They have training on schools and transitions and deployment cycles, and so there's a lot of great resources. And then they have a new online curriculum that is through TEDx. It's a TED Talk somehow, TED ED or something like that, that I was just browsing around yesterday. I was looking at it. Another thing, if you're just working with military families and it comes up in conversation about certain things, Military One Source is a great resource and referral website for providers as well as military families. And so this can be anything from financial help to mental health, to child care, resources and referrals for child care, or after school programs if they need something with that. Another thing, talking about after school programs, if you work as a licensed state provider, whether it's after school or a child care, and you can apply through the Child Care Aware website link. You can apply as a provider there, and if Guard or Reserve families have a service member that becomes activated and deployed, they can receive extra funding from the Department of Defense, similar if they lived on an installation where they could send their child to a school-age center or a child care center. They will get some extra money, and they can actually pay you directly as the provider and kind of help subsidize the amount that is due for that military family. Another unique thing is Tutor.com has free tutoring for military families and dependents. So if you work with youth that are really struggling, that is an option for you. And I think that's everything for my resources. But again, I just wanted to thank you all for tuning in. I know it was a lot of maybe kind of information, and you're not sure how to process it all, but I think Sandra said it best, that you just treat military youth as all the youth within your center, and just work to develop a amazing youth-adult partnership and help build the resiliency. So thank you.